we're going to start with a song. Mm-hmm. So Melina, would you mind typing? There's the lyrics down there. Will you mind putting that in the chat? So this is a song called Loosen by Ali Halpert. And Lena's about to stick the lyrics in the chat and you'll catch on. It's very repetitive. And so if you want to keep yourself muted, you can sing along. Okay, here we go.
Loosen, loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Loosen, loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Loosen, loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Loosen, loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Holy breath and holy name. Will you ease this pain? Holy breath and holy name. Will you ease this pain? Loosen, loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Loosen, loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Loosen, loosen, baby. Holy breath and holy name. Will you ease this pain? Holy breath, will you ease this pain? Will you ease this pain? Will you ease this pain?
Wonderful. Thanks for singing with us. Hi, I'm Arti. I use they, them pronouns.
Hi, I'm Melina. I use they, them pronouns too.
What else do you want to say about us?
We're two different people with different lives, but we're also both folks who've been through the Community Dharma Leader program at True North Insight. We're both therapists. We're both in advanced Somatic Experiencing training, and we're also just friends. So we thought it'd be fun to get to share together because we don't always live in the same city. But right now, Arti is in Toronto, staying down the street from me in the East End. So this was a really nice treat to get to do 2 sessions with Jill's invitation. For those of you who normally come on Wednesdays, Jill is away for the month and has a roster of guests jumping in. So we're honored to do this.
Yes,
What else do you want to say about this?
absolutely. Just a little overview of what we're going to be doing today, which is I'll be leading a practice. Melina will lead a practice a little bit later on. We'll talk a little bit about skillful means in a dharmic context, and then we'll also give you a little intro to some trauma theory that might be useful. And then next week will be more of a little bit more on trauma theory, and then a whole lot about how Dharma is already trauma informed, as long as we keep all the context in. Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Okay, so let's start with a practice. So finding a posture that feels right for you. This might be sitting, standing, or lying down. And a trauma-informed practice that's important to me is building a container. And one of the ways that we can help to build a container is through the process of finding an anchor. Very often in our mindfulness practice, the anchor is the breath, but it doesn't have to be. And so I thought we might spend some time exploring different anchors to see which one feels right for you. Okay. So resting in your posture, noticing the earth, who is always here supporting us. Feeling into the contact your sits bones are making with the earth. And then noticing the other parts of your body that are also touching the earth. That might be your feet. If you're lying down, it might be your whole back body. If your back is being supported by a chair, that counts too. Really noticing all the ways that support is here right now. And see if you can give your body over just a little bit more to that support. Feeling into the weight of gravity. And then as you feel into that downward pull of gravity, see if you can also feel into the upward pull of the spine. You can imagine that there's a little string at the top of your head, and a very, very gentle fairy pulls ever so slightly on that string to help you feel into the strength of your back body. Allowing yourself to feel the width of your back, the broadness of this strength. Starting from the shoulders and drawing your attention down to the lower back. So feeling into the earth and being held there, and feeling into the strength of the back body. See if you can land at the softness of the heart. bringing your attention to the heart space. Knowing that with the strong container, it's safer to be in the squishy heart. And finding the breath. And so let's start there. Breath as anchor. Notice where it's easiest to find the breath. So that might be in the belly, chest, on the upper lip, or in the back body. And notice that the breath is going in when the breath is going in, and that it's going out when the breath is going out. Sometimes it can be helpful to label in and out. And of course, the mind will do what the mind does, which is wander. And we can gently bring our attention back to the in and the out. And then we can work with the anchor of hearing. So noticing what you can hear right now. That might be the hum of electronics or traffic on the road, or maybe some chit chat. Try not to get too interested in the content and just note hearing. And so when the mind wanders, we can gently bring our attention to hearing as a way to anchor us to this present moment. And then the last anchor is the sense of the body sitting. So returning back to that really grounded sense, Feeling again the sits bones on the earth. Feeling into the heaviness, the weightiness of the body. And when the mind wanders, to bring the attention back to where body meets earth and earth meets body. So we're going to be talking a little bit about trauma today. And one of the things that is really good trauma-informed practice is choice, because often what trauma takes away from us is choice. And so getting to choose in which moment, which harbor feels right for you. Sometimes it can get confusing if you hop around too much, but it's a nice thing to just sort of, you don't always have to be with the breath if the breath is a difficult one for you.
Great. Thank you. Yeah. And so tonight and next week's title is the word Upaya, Upaya, which comes from the Sanskrit. And it's translated sometimes as skillful means or expedient means. And it comes from the Lotus Sutra, which is a text that's not usually studied in Theravada spaces like True North Insight. And yet the term is used so often, it's become, pervasively known throughout much of Buddhism, Anglo-Buddhist spaces. You'll hear the term come up. And we were inspired by it for a lot of reasons, in part because it's part of what Arti was saying. Like the Dharma is already, if we want to look at trauma informed as a lens of how to practice, how to expand, how to ground the Dharma in real life, especially for difficult situations, difficult experiences. It's already there, and so we felt that Upaya was a place that the Dharma is already trauma informed, if we will. It's not just about trauma informed, but it includes this. And so the Lotus Sutra is still one of the most widely studied, practiced, devoted to sutras in all of Buddhism across history. It's incredibly powerful teaching. It's a bunch of stories kind of and teachings collected together. And there's lots of debate as to the origins, etc. But it started being recorded, I think, in the 2nd century. Is still widely venerated and engaged in across much of Northern and Eastern Asian Buddhism, but we find it all around the world. And one of the main concepts taught in the Lotus Sutra is Upaya, skillful means. And this came out of the context of the rise of Mahayana, the Northern school, if you want to call it that. And, there's some tension between the different traditions. And the traditions that based on the Pali text would often say, well, the Mahayana, you're not even real. You're not from our canon. And then the Mahayanas were constantly finding ways to say, like, no, we are real. um, and we don't have to go deeply into the history, but even 80 years after the Buddha's teaching, Buddha passed, there were over 18 different threads and streams of Dharma. And the way many folks understand it today is that the roots of what we call Mahayana today were already present way back from the beginning, because the Buddha was so, so prolific a teacher. You taught for about 45 years. Sometimes people would come, study with him, hear one teaching, they get ordained and say, go off, go, follow with a mentor for 5 years, and then go spread this in every direction. So there was, especially in the early days, there wasn't an effort to control and homogenize the teachings. So these different flavors of Dharma were really present from the beginning. And yet the movement that we call Mahayana really grew in strength around the turn of the Common Era. And the Lotus Sutra was part of this, showing a movement that really centers around the Bodhisattva path, which is about awakening for the sake of all beings. You could say so much about that, but this isn't going to be a big heady talk. I just want to give a little bit of context as we're getting into this term and this concept. And so there was, with the introduction of Upaya, is the idea that there are countless ways to approach the Dharma, to practice the Dharma, and that the Dharma can be shared in numerous ways. Some places call it the 84,000 Dharma doors, that there are limitless ways to encounter, to share the Dharma. And sometimes we share it through silence. Sometimes we share it through speech. Sometimes we have our different anchors. Sometimes it's a story like the Jataka tales. Yeah. And so as we are both folks deeply involved in practicing Dharma long-term, as well as trauma therapists, I know for myself, but I think I can speak for both of us, that so much of the applications we've been learning through the trauma therapies have really helped to nuance applications of Dharma. And we want to talk about trauma-informed Dharma as opposed to trauma-informed mindfulness, because trauma-informed mindfulness is often presented as if like the psychotherapeutic Western psychological models are the truth, and oh, look, mindfulness supports the truths that we already know. Whereas we want to hold Dharma as a cosmological understanding, as an ancient tradition, as holding much bigger truths than Western psychology understands, but that it is part of what we can learn through the Dharma. And there's really important nuances that the psychotherapeutic and trauma-informed lenses offer. I know for myself, especially where the traditional teachings, I can get stuck, students can get stuck, things can get kind of turned around, and having an understanding of the nervous system has just like revolutionized how I understand working with stuckness, applying which teaching when, in which ways. So I think, is that enough about introducing Upaya?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're at 8 o'clock, just so you know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I'll share a story and then you'll share a story. Okay. So I'll share a story from the Lotus Sutra. So the Buddha is speaking to Sariputra, who's a loyal follower, and telling him this story about some children who are playing in a house. And they're all hanging out in that house, and they're very, very absorbed with these games that they really like. And their father is outside of the house, and he notices, oh, the house is up in flames. And so he screams to the kids, get out of there. The house is in flames. You're in danger. And the kids are totally absorbed, and they're like, yeah, whatever, Dad. I want to play my game. And so he yells again, and that doesn't work. And so he has this moment of, I'll convince them to come out with a little bit of trickery, you know. So he says to them, I've got your favorite games here. This kid, you like this game, and this kid, you like this game. And so as the kids were really absorbed in their greed, you know, they're clinging to what feels good. Um, the father was able to use the greed as a way to get the kids out. And then the kids came out and they were like, oh, dad was right. The house is burning down. And so the Buddha said to Sariputra, you know, what do you think about this? Do you think that this is like an okay thing to do? You know, is it false speech? Is it not? And Sariputra was like, no, of course it's not, because, you know, the kids didn't die. And this is a really important lesson around skillful means. Sometimes we got to do things that don't always seem like it's the most skillful thing, but it might be in the moment. Yeah.
And then I also wanted to bring in the story of Kisagotami and the mustard seed, which I imagine many of you may have heard. It's almost always taught and shared in the context of understanding the universality of death. Kisagotami is a woman who's had a baby who died. So a whole backstory as to why this is not just any grief, but particularly atrocious grief in her life. And I think it's fair to say, lost her sanity. She kept, carried around the dead baby from doctor to doctor saying, please revive my baby. And people were pretty freaked out. But finally someone said, you know, the Buddha's at the edge of the town. Why don't you go ask him? Maybe he can help you. And the Buddha met her and she said, please, please help save my baby. And the Buddha said, you know, I want to help you. I will help you. But to do so, you need to bring me a mustard seed from a house where no one has ever died. And she said, okay, I'm going to do it. She goes off, goes house to house, asks people, can you give me a mustard seed to help save my baby? And they said, oh, of course I'll give you a mustard seed. People have mustard seeds all the time. They're plentiful, they're tiny, they're ubiquitous. And then she said, oh, but has anyone died? And time again, everyone said, oh, you know, I wish I could help you, but we've had a lot of people die here. And so the traditional teaching is that eventually Kisagotami came to realize, oh, yeah, we can't avoid death. Death happens. And she was able to accept that her baby had died. And a few years later, she joined the nuns order, became one of the first enlightened nuns. And we have her poems today, which is why we know about her. So she had a great awakening that came after this desperately difficult time. But why I want to bring this in here is it's not a common translation, but Kisa Gotami was someone going through tremendous trauma. I think it'd be fair to say that she was experiencing a lot of PTSD. And the Buddha didn't give her a Dharma talk. He didn't tell her, go sit with your pain. And there's such a prevalence I find in some contexts of sharing Dharma in ways that don't always match someone's reality. Whereas for me, this is, you know, like one of the earliest texts of the Buddha's natural trauma-informed understanding. He sent her to go be with people who I imagine fed her and listened to her and comforted her. And through that human connection, she was able to regain a sense of humanity. She was able to grieve. She was able to fall apart. And then a few years later, when she was ready, she came to the teachings. And man, did she ever dive in, right? um, and so this is, you know, our Arti shared the story where like we can get so caught up in our greed and we may need sort of these skillful means to get us not so consumed in our greed, but also our grief, our despair, our agony. We can get really lost in those things too. And it may not be a traditional path to the Dharma that helps us, but anything that helps us lessen suffering, be more in touch and more able to experience reality, can help us on a Dharma path. Yeah.
Beautiful. I love that story every time I hear it. Um, so we wanted to move into talking a little tiny bit about trauma. Um, so what is trauma? It's when something very difficult happens and it's too much too fast, too soon. That's a definition from Respa Menakem. And in our Dharma practice, the idea is that we're supposed to be with everything that's here as it's here, whether it's difficult to be with or easy to be with or neutral to be with. But when things are overwhelming, it's really hard to be with it, right? And so we can get really caught up in, I should have seen the flames if I was inside the house. I should have seen them. But we just often can't, And instead of taking it so personally, we can actually rest into, oh, too much, too fast, too soon. No blame here. Okay. So we're going to go over, I think, 5 or 6 trauma principles. And today we're just going to do 2 or 3. And then next week we'll get into a few more. And there's many, many principles, but we just kind of picked our favorite ones. So this was learned through Somatic Experiencing, which is Peter Levine's work. So when we're working with a sensation or a memory or an image that's very big and overwhelming, right? It's really, really important that we go slow. And our bodies are not designed to do that. Our bodies are designed for a tiger is here. We're gonna, use all of our energy to look at the tiger and make sure that we can run so we can fight, flight, or flee from it, right? And that makes sense because we've got to keep ourselves really safe. But oftentimes, what our bodies are responding to these days is like, someone cut me off in traffic. I have an exam to do. It's not the same as a tiger most of the time. And so, one of the ways we can kind of work with that biology, that physiology that is always kind of scanning for what's not working is through this concept of titration. So, titration is a word that comes from chemistry. So let's say you've got 2 beakers and you've got a dropper in one of the beakers. So let's say they're explosive. If you combine them, they're explosive. So instead of just kind of directly pouring one of the beakers into the other beaker and then an explosion happens, what you do is grab the dropper and grab just a tiny, tiny bit of that fluid and add it to the other beaker. And that way the explosion doesn't happen. So that's how we want to deal with overwhelming feelings. Okay.
And can I just say,
Yeah.
in that way, it is a being with it, sit with it, but it's just not all of it at once.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where sometimes some of the more traditional Dharma instructions are a bit more like, just sit with all of it at once, or else run away. We don't want you to run away. Sit with all of it. But this gives us the nuance of, yeah, be with it a little at a time.
A little at a time. Yeah. And so really the trauma principles that we're going to be talking about today are all about that. Like, and next week, they're all about how do you sit with this, but in a skillful way where you're not getting overwhelmed by it. And so one of the ways that I like to be with feelings is just by opening my eyes. So in the practice, we're very often told to keep our eyes closed or gaze down. It can be really helpful to notice a big contraction in the body and then open the eyes. And so maybe I'm looking at a plant, which is really pleasant to look at, and then also paying attention to the big contraction. I might notice just the outline of a sensation. So I have a lot of, it's less so these days, but I've had a lot of chronic pain in my life. And instead of kind of, looking right at the tiger, right at the center of the intensity of the pain, I'll instead draw an outline. Where does the pain begin and end? And can I stay just at the edges of that? Another technique is reverse binoculars. So binoculars take an image that's from over here and brings it right in close to you. And you want to imagine that you're kind of putting on the binoculars on backwards. So an image that is really, really right here gets pushed farther away. And so let's say I am noticing in my day that I've had a conflict with someone and I'm ruminating about it. I can't stop thinking about this person. I'm coming up with all these stories about how awful they are or how awful I am or something. And, we've all experienced this before. Dropping right into the conflict sometimes, again, it's like looking at the tiger between the eyes. It's too much. But what I can do is imagine that person is on the moon. Or if that's too close and I still can't fully feel myself, then I can imagine them on a different solar system, right? And for me, I mean, I think this is just the trauma theory that we've learned in somatic experiencing. How I know I'm doing okay and I can be with what's here isn't really about comfort. It's not about does this feel comfortable? It's more about can I witness it? So if our witness this the you know if our witness is offline, if our witness can't actually notice what's happening, then that means we've got to back off in some way. We've got to titrate in some way. Does that make sense? So yeah, you can throw someone on the moon. And then if you're interested, you can be like, okay, that feels okay. I can handle you on the moon. I'm not ruminating as much. Rumination is often a kind of flight energy of trying to get away from something through overthinking. And so if that's not happening, then it's like, okay, well, maybe I'll want to put them in Tibet. Maybe I want to put them in Italy. Maybe I want to put them in where I'm in Toronto. So maybe I want to put them in Ontario, but maybe not in Toronto. Maybe that's too close. And so there's a bit of playfulness that can happen with titration as well. And playfulness is such a huge part of this work. And of our practice too. Our practice can be really, really playful and therefore enjoyable. Yeah.
There's nothing like taking the practice too seriously to trigger some trauma stuff through the practice. And so we want to really attend and allow for playfulness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Choice points.
Mhm.
We talk a lot in our practice about choice points, choosing when to do what. And so you can try something, test it out, and it's like, well, that was opening up a door that it's not skillful to open that door up right now. So you choose something else. There's not really a right or wrong. It's just about trying things out, right? Ehipasiko, trying for yourself.
Yeah.
Pendulation.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so the other principle we wanted to share tonight is pendulation, which if you've seen a pendulum, like it's the idea of going back and forth. And so getting closer to what's charged and hard and maybe scary, and then moving away from it to something that feels okay. And it's something that we can intentionally practice, but it's also the natural rhythm of life. We have times when we're more awake, times when we're more tired and we sleep, times of more energy, times of less energy. It's the seasons of life, seasons of the year. Like this is a natural rhythm, but we can also train in specifically. Sometimes we draw like a figure eight of going towards the thing that's scary, going towards the thing that's been painful. You know, I'm both rooted in insight practice as well as the Plum Village tradition. I was a monastic for a number of years, and we would often talk in Plum Village. We would go for walking meditation outdoors as a group together every day. And we were often encouraged, bring your sadness with you on the walk. Bring your anger, bring your parents, your deceased ones, your friends who are having a hard time to energetically bring them with you. Um, and it's a way to like draw nearer to what is hard with care, but then to not stay there forever. Um, I think I actually learned this most deeply through a practice that we have in the Plum Village tradition of prostration. And its prostrations are found through, I think, every Buddhist tradition. But particularly one of the many ways we would do it was that there's an ancestor interdependence practice where when standing up, you get in touch with the good qualities of the types of ancestors that you're going through. And then when you're bowing down on the ground, you get in touch with, and if there's space to release the wounds, the traumas that have been passed down. And we would do this, so maybe stand for a minute or two, contemplating first familial, blood ancestors, the gifts and the skills, and then on the ground, like contemplating and maybe releasing the wounds and the traumas received. But then you have to get up again and contemplate the gifts and skills of your cultural ancestors, and then on the ground releasing the wounds and traumas. And then so we go back and forth, and this is a practice we'd often spend like a half hour, 45 minutes doing. And that was actually the first, I had never heard of pendulation. But as I did that for weeks on weeks and then over the years, but I had done a daily practice for an intensive time, I was like, oh my gosh, there's something brilliant in this, like go into the pain of it, but then come out of it and be with the joy and the gratitude, but then also move towards what is hard. And the intentional doing both, especially with something physical, was one of the most transformative things I ever found through those practices. It still informs everything that I do. And then I was like, oh, look, there's a name for this. And it wasn't that Peter Levine discovered all of this. This was all the wisdom of humans. But there's a formulation that we learned in a particular way. And it's been really helpful to have these terms of like, oh, that's what it was about this. Oh, and how can I work that in different ways? So does that also make sense in terms of like we love all the trauma stuff and the therapy stuff, but these are small pieces within the large context of not just Dharma, but human wisdom across the ages and across traditions. Like this is implicitly human.
I mean, also Peter Levine did just take these from indigenous cultures around the world and just, put a trademark on it. But yeah, just to be real about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so this idea of pendulation, just to say, it can also be in small ways where, like Arti said, of like, okay, there's this pain here, but is there also a part that feels okay? To not put all of our attention, because our negativity bias can get really stuck in just the negative. But there are also ways that different personalities and even meditation practice can become this bypassing, this dissociative practice of like, I'm just not going to notice anything unpleasant. And for some people, their minds actually work that way. Mine doesn't. But I know lots of folks where it does. They're like, oh, I thought I was an amazing meditator, but actually I'm really dissociated. So it's easy to sit for 2 hours and not feel anything and not have much going on. And I thought that was good meditation, but actually I'm just as distressed when I finish as when I started, So this like going in, going out, or being able to hold some of the difficult and some of the stable and grounded and maybe pleasant is part of this idea of pendulation. And I think it's a great image for our practice in general. Are we practicing karuna and mudita? Are we tending to the relieving suffering of the world and celebrating in the success and the goodness and reveling in the beauty of the sunset? Are we doing both? Or do we get stuck in one more than the other? There's specific ways and big picture ways that these principles really can inform how to find our own balance, how to become our own guides in our practice. Yeah.
Oh, I just really love Melina. Tita. And just to say that sometimes when things are really, really hard, it's really hard to find that joy or something that feels really good to ground into. And in those moments, particularly, this was a practice for me for a long time with chronic pain where every part of my body felt like it was on fire. And so I would pendulate with what felt like it was least on fire. It's like, oh, my baby toe. I can't really feel that. That's mostly neutral. Great. I'm going to try to be with that for 3 moments while the fiery parts of my body are screaming at me to notice. I'm like, I see you. I see you, friend. See you. I'm going to just pay attention to the toe for a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to do about 10-minute practice, and some of you will have to leave at 8:30, but if anyone wants to stay for some conversation, we will open it up after that and close the recording. But just to say that there'll be one more practice. And so get yourself ready. If you do want to shift your posture, you're welcome to do that. This will work in any of the postures, sitting, standing, lying down. It could work walking if that's what you're wanting, or with a little bit of movement. I don't know. I haven't done that so much. But if you're inspired, go for it. You can have your camera on or off. And so we're going to work with a little bit of this titration and pendulation. And I'm going to invite us to something a little more dynamic, to think of something that is charged for you. And we know that for some of us, hurricanes are either affecting us or our loved ones. This week of a year of the atrocities in Gaza and now in Lebanon, and for many, the October 7th violence is still very painful in their hearts too. There's so many ways that there's a trust. There's just so much that might be sparking us, that might be charged. And so in a trauma-informed context, we're not inviting you to think of the most difficult thing possible, but something that has a bit of a charge. We're thinking of a scale of like a 3 to 5 would be ideal. And so if you can choose something, don't worry if it's right or wrong, just whatever comes to mind. We're not going to practice for that long with it. So hopefully just choose something. We're still going to start with an anchor. You might choose the same one that you had last time. Be rooting to where the body is held by the ground. That sense of gravity, maybe of pressure, being held, or the movement of breath. The listening to sounds, the hearing, sounds come and go. Many options for anchors. And I like to kind of fill the space with a little bit of maybe warmth or kindness, almost like sun shining in, to check that I have the space to work with the charge. Maybe that's receiving the love of the earth, the kindness of the earth holding us, of the air that's breathing us, giving us life in every moment. Our nervous system's trying to keep us alive and keep us safe and protected is a kind of care and love, if we choose to see it as such. Maybe a way that humans or animals have offered us kindness in the past, to just tap into something that we can find a bit of okayness in, or a little less distress in. And we're going to invite in some of the heartache, grief, anger, fear, something that is charged. And we might invite it in as close as the moon, or we might invite it in right next to us, or something in between. And offer the gift of our attention. Bathing what is hard with some kind and curious and supported awareness. Don't have to do it alone. The earth is holding all this with us. We are doing this in a virtual communal space. So you're welcome to call us in to help you hold this, even from a distance. It might be hard to meet something that's charged with kindness, or might want it to stay out on the moon, but it just sticks to you. And so if it's too much, then intentionally shift attention. Like Arti said, we can look at a plant, use the visual field if that helps. Sometimes massaging the ears or just a little like squeezing your hands together will help come back to here and now, or pushing your feet into the ground if it's hard, if it's a little too overwhelming and too sticky with what is charged. But if it's not overwhelming, see if just for maybe 2-3 more minutes, we can hold the anchor and some awareness. It might be like little back and forths between, say, a part of the body that doesn't feel the fear, and then a part of the body that does feel the fear, just little figure eights back and forth. Or it may be less movement and just okay, I know that there is this fear, and then I also know that I am held. And another piece is that while traditional Dharma instructions really tend to encourage stillness, there's a way that if we've been forced to stay silent or still in ways that were dangerous, it's really important to not force ourselves to keep being still, but we can apply the mindfulness and the intention of the stillness to, okay, maybe we do need to shift. Maybe something is wanting to tremble and we consciously let it tremble. So it's actually not distracting us from reality. It's taking us into the present moment more fully. Cultivating this deep respect for our systems, deep compassion. We're going to get ready to close. So if you want to release the charged theme, maybe send it far away and really ground into what feels okay or what feels less charged, or through the senses. If you need some help to release the charge, you might intentionally invite just a little swaying, a little wiggling, not to end and shift out of practice, but to allow the practice to expand, to include some flow. Maybe when you're ready, if your eyes have been closed, inviting in the visual field, just noticing form and color as part of the practice. I'm going to offer 3 sounds of the bell, which can be, again, this listening as a form of practice. I know that for some folks, you got to go. It's been a long day. We're delighted that you could join us. And if you can stay and you want to share some reflections and conversation, please do. I will throw, I think we said that we would use my email and PayPal link. We will share the Dana. If you're able to offer anything, please do. And if you just offer it today or tomorrow, I'll know that it's for this and know to split it. But if it comes in a little later, could you please put a little note of what this is for so that I know how to share it? So it's just Melina Bondi at gmail.com.
Y is missing.
Thank you. Is for e-transfer and on my website, Melina Bondi. And I think actually you can PayPal the same email address. So I think that that's enough. So I'm going to stop the recording now.